Absolutely no one has done more to promote art in El Paso than this lady. Adair Margo, former First Lady of the town, and a resume too long to even describe Adair. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Let's go back in time a little bit. You're a third-generation El Pasoan.
I am, on my mother's side. My mother was born here. Her grandparents were born here, and my great-grandparents are the ones who came here. One a Baptist minister who baptized Tom Lea, the other a physician who worked on both sides of the border.
Okay, so you went off to Vanderbilt in Nashville, right? And you met someone sort of special to you at Vanderbilt. Who was that?
Yes, Adair Margo, who was there on a football scholarship.
Dee played football?
Well, I never saw him. He got hurt, but anyway, that's how he got his college education, with the scholarship.
Okay, so you two fell in love in college, and then you came back to El Paso and were married here?
We were married in El Paso in 1976.
Wow. Okay, so walk us through the beginning of the Margo family. How did you all go to work?
Well, my dad had come here in the military, a Tennessean. He went to work for my father-in-law, my mother's father, John D. Williams, who had a very small insurance operation. And my dad had gotten 3 Fordham physicists working at White Sands Missile Range. BDM International became their company, but they had dreams of being a resource to the Department of Defense, and he had work to do in Washington. So he hired Dee from Nashville, where we were living, to come help him here, and then died soon after, and Dee took over the business. 7 employees that ended up going to 77 and then sold to Hub International.
So Dee had to buy the company.
He bought the company from the estate.
Dee took it and built it into the monster insurance company that it is today, and your son took over.
Well, he built it. He would always say, Dee was always been part of a team. You know, he was a football player, an offensive guard. And so it was always a team, and it was always a team effort. And so he allowed stockholders in his business when it was locally owned. But then it ended up selling to Hub International, and everybody, a lot of people benefited, not just Dee.
So while Dee was doing that, you were busy as well. Now, you opened up a wonderful art gallery.
I did.
The Adair Margo Gallery. Tell us about that.
I did. Well, that was when Dee and I first moved back here, I graduated from Vanderbilt, studied in Italy, art history. And I think, like many people, when you graduate, you realize how you don't know anything. So I ended up going to New Mexico State, where there was an art historian, Italian, who taught, and I got my master's degree up there. And after I got my master's, and one thing that was significant is that when I was studying at New Mexico State, an Italian art historian suggested to me, he lectured in Las Cruces. He said, why don't you do your master's thesis on Franciscan mission architecture in New Mexico? And I thought, great idea, I'll have to go to Italy to study it. And all I needed to do was walk to Juarez and find a prime example in the mission of Nuestra Senora de Guadalupe.
It was all right.
So that it was all right here, and that was kind of the beginning. I thought everything was in Italy, and no, it's not all in Italy. There's a lot here that no one knows about. So I did my thesis on that. And then a friend of ours who had a frame shop asked me to be his art consultant, Frank McKnight. He had Galleria Colonial, it's where Joe Jeske is now, on the corner of Cincinnati and Stanton. And I worked there as an art consultant, which I didn't even know what that meant, but it really meant selling some art on the walls of his frame shop.
And that's how your gallery began.
That's how it began.
Of course, then it migrated into the Tom Lea Institute. That lives on today, and that is a big deal. Quickly, Tom Lea, he was a game changer, at least for you personally.
He was a game changer.
So coming up, Tom Lea, he's a cornerstone of El Paso artistry. That's coming up next.
Hello everyone, I'm Adair Margo, founder of the Tom Lea Institute, and you're watching Studio 9.
Tom Lea, El Paso artist, passed away in 2001, but his art lives on. Adair, his painting was in the George W. Bush White House for years.
For 8 years, and LBJ had a Tom Lea in his White House too. And the Sam Rayburn building there on Capitol Hill was done by Tom Lea. So they're quite, and the study for our mural that's now in the History Museum, but it used to be in our library, it will go back to the library, is in the Smithsonian American Art Museum. So he's present in our nation's capital.
Tom Lea literally was a frontier man and really was a game changer, as you'd mentioned. Tell us about his history.
Well, you know, his dad was mayor 1915 to 1917. He was born here. His mother said she could see Mount Franklin from the window of her hospital room. He said by the time he got to he went to public schools, he went to Lamar Elementary, he went to El Paso High School, and he said the teachers he had took such interest in him, as did the librarian, Maud Derlin Sullivan at the public library, who always would open art books for him. And El Paso at the time had all these bilingual books and, you know, many books from Mexico and art history books. And so he really was got a lot of exposure to art as a child growing up on in this frontier town. So he said when he went off to the Art Institute, and it was actually his high school teacher whose sister knew John Warner Norton, who taught at the Art Institute of Chicago. She said he was a good Western type. You know, so he'd ridden with Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. So, you know, they'd never had an artist in the family.
We have a treasure of his in the courthouse, in the federal building?
In the federal courthouse, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, that was when he went to Chicago, he ended up working as an apprentice to John Warner Norton during murals. So when the New Deal kicked in and they were supporting artists all over the United States, he was a trained muralist. And the piece in our courthouse was done in 1938. It was a big competition from people from many states, and he got it to express. All of those murals were really about raising people's spirits during the Great Depression through focusing on their historic past. And so he won the competition for our new federal courthouse, the first link to the federal government that happened in El Paso.
You were also telling me that Tom Lea did something else. He made people realize that you don't have to go anywhere to be inspired by incredible artwork. It's all right here in El Paso, Juarez. So other artists, for example, the one hanging over here, tell me about that.
Well, and I think what he did go away to get his education. Now we have so many more offerings than we did back then. But the inspiration for his art was here. And you're talking about Andrew Joseph, who has lived elsewhere, but his real calling is to be in El Paso because he feels nourished, as does his girlfriend, Xochitl Burciaga, who both live in the artist loft next door. And so much of their art, all of their art really, is looking at our history, our people, our environment, and making it interactive, like in this Loteria game. They have a box game that's wonderful, so you learn your history by playing, but I had asked them for the West Star Tower to turn it into a work of art we could put on the wall.
That Loteria, absolutely amazing, and all El Paso and beautiful. Adair, I could talk to you for hours about El Paso art and all you've done, but thank you so much. Such an education and such an inspiration.